Third phase of moon.
Megalithic and pyramid sites researcher Dr. Sam Osmanagic as he returns to Göbekli Tepe in eastern Turkey. The mysteries behind the megalithic structures discovered around the world. Well, we have the man who has developed a sequence of investigative tours around the world. Brian Forrester's with us, and we're going to go over the mysteries of Egypt and much, much more.
I'm in eastern Turkey. Behind me is arguably the most impressive and the most important archaeological site in the world. It is known under the name Gobekli Tepe. Back in the 1960s, first British archaeologists and then in 63 archaeologists from the US came to the area. They found some ceramic pieces and they of course established that this was an archaeological site. For them it was just medieval site. And then University of Chicago with the local museum started doing some very limited excavation. They realized it is a little bit older, but then very soon they gave up on it. Back in 1993, German archaeologist Dr. Klaus Schmidt came to the area upon finishing one of his archaeological assignments, and then he realized this might be a very intriguing place to dig. Next year, 1994, he started digging. At that time, he was part of the German Archaeological Institute of Istanbul. And very soon, during his 20 years of being at this site, he became one of the most popular archaeologists ever, even more popular than Schliemann from the end of the 19th century. Why was that? With the help of the first German Archaeological Institute from Heidelberg, and then later on the one from Berlin, who were financing this site, they realized that they are in the front of the oldest known structure in the mainstream archaeological world. How did they figure that one out? They started digging here on the top of this hill. Now this hill has a commanding view of the area, tens of kilometers around us. And where are we exactly? We are at the place where such two important areas meet. One is Minor Asia or Anatolia, today's Turkey, and the other one is Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia between two rivers, two major rivers from the ancient past, Tigris and Euphrates. So this is the place where a lot of activities have been going on in the distant past. People coming from east, going to the west, and vice versa, they were coming to this area. Now, when he started digging, as we can see below us, he went about 15 meters deep, discovering these big megaliths. What is a megalith? It contains two Greek words, mega, big, and lithos, rock. So big rocks. As we can see, these are upstanding rocks, megaliths. They are nicely shaped. Most of them have the shape of letter T. Now, in the past, in the last 30 years, from 1980s, a similar style was discovered here, and nowhere else on the planet. T-shaped blocks. The biggest blocks are just on the opposite side. They are about 5.5 meters in height. We can calculate its mass real quick. So we have 5.5 meters, we have about 60 centimeters by 120, so it is about 5.7 to 3.5, so it is about 8 to 10 tons. 8 to 10 tons. Now, another intriguing thing, the biggest rocks are the deepest. What does that mean? Those who came later, they were smaller and smaller. And above us, there is even a higher area with the smallest blocks. Now we know, due to the radiocarbon datings, that those that are, closer to the surface, they are of course younger. What they teach us in schools is the theory of evolution. Before we were primitive, and with the time we were developing more and more. We were becoming more intelligent, technologically advanced, and so on. So we were capable of carving and shaping bigger and bigger blocks. Here is opposite. So the theory of evolution does not really apply here, because the biggest pieces and the most impressive piece, years of his work, he realized that this place is a temple. Now, what is a temple? According to the dictionaries, temple is a place where people do their religious or spiritual ceremonies. According to the mainstream science, spiritual ceremony means you do the process of sacrificing, or you bring certain stuff to the gods. Well, if you look at the place, there is not a single proof that it was used as a temple. I don't think that anybody was sacrificed here, and I don't think that this was a temple. There is also a theory that there was a roof here. However, we can see different elevations. There is no way that you could have one or two roofs. Second thing, there is not a single remnant of those potential roofs. So I kindly disagree with Dr. Klaus Schmidt and the German Archaeological Institute that this was a temple, because it was not. Mainstream archaeology, when they don't have answers, they use things like religious purposes, ceremonies, spiritual, or temples. We don't have proof for that. How come after 20 years of the work they could not figure out what was the real purpose of this site? The reason why, it was only archaeological work. Archaeologists do not have a knowledge, they don't have an engineering mind to get to the real, true purpose of the site. Now, let's go back to those blocks. As you can see, some of them are plain, flat, nothing on them. However, some of them have a lot of, zoomorphic figures. Now, we have different animals. We have lions, we have wild boars, we have hyenas, we have reptiles, we have snakes, we have some even dinosaur type animals. What does that indicate? It indicates that we don't have domestic animals here. Without domestic animals, it is telling us that this is not the phase that belongs to the agricultural society. Very important. When it comes to the dating, Dr. Klaus Schmidt did basically 2+2 dating. 2 dating were done on the filler material. What filler material? Well, according to him, there were 2 phases of these structures. According to me, there were 3 phases. So, first the conventional view. He's saying 2 phases. The first phase is the phase when they built, erected those blocks, and they connected them, according to him, with his drywalls. Rather primitive. And the second phase was when the whole site was covered in hurry, as he claimed, with the filler material. Filler material is this one right here. You can see rocks, pebbles, you can see soil, you can see clay, you can see sand. Well, when he found organic material in the filler, what kind of organic material? He found ground animal bones and ground human bones. The age was about 10,000 years BC, before Christ. So it gives us 12,000 years. Well, officially you go to the non-scientific sites like Wikipedia, you can read it is 11,600 years old. Wrong. Why they are doing that? Because they want to be younger than the end of the last ice age, which was about 11,500 years back. If you go more than that, this is the border that conventional science does not want to cross. They want to stay in what they call Neolithic times. Neolithic, 11,500 years. 12,000 plus, Paleolithic, primitive caveman, not capable of doing anything here, really. So, what we have here, we have a site which is 12,000 radiocarbon date. But this is not a calendar age. Why not? because calendar age, you need to add approximately 15%. 15% on 12,000 years is about 1,800 years. So 12,000 plus 1,800 is 13,800 years. So now we are going to the Paleolithic times. Conventional science does not want to hear that, but this is the fact. So the filler material, when they close this place, is so old. Now, the second source of dating were the plasters that they found on those megaliths. The plasters produce two dates, and both of them are around 9,500 BC. Again, 11,500. When you account for 15%, we are coming to 13,500, almost 14,000 years. That's why this place is so interesting for me. And that's why it is so annoying and unpleasant for the mainstream science. So this is the dating. Many people will try to reduce this dating to 8,100 years, like they are doing already, and eventually to 5,000 years, trying to prove that this is typical chronology that we have in the last 5,000 years. Everything started with Sumerians, Babylon, Akkad, Assyria, ancient Egypt, Hittites, ancient India, and so on. Wrong. This belongs to the previous cycle. This was the cycle which is also known as pre-pottery Paleolithic times. Well, Dr. Klaus Schmidt trying to put it in pre-pottery Neolithic A times. It's even older than that, Paleolithic. 6 years ago, in October of 2013, I first came to this site. I came here, everything looked so much differently. At that time, they started protecting the site with the ugly wooden posts. Everywhere was wood. You could not see almost anything. Today, when Turkish government took over, it's much nicer. They spend much more money, but then you can see the whole site. You cannot touch it, and it is not supposed to be touched. You can observe the whole thing. Right now, we have 8 enclosures or 8 circles with the 4 big circles behind me, A, B, C, and D. And the other one, up to letter H, are behind us. So those first 4 are really the most impressive. And they were completely buried in the filler material. What is the difference in explanation between me and Dr. Klaus Schmidt when it comes not only to dating, because I claim they are much older, but also the way they constructed it? He's talking about 2 phases, I'm talking about the 3. The first phase, they were erecting in a very nice way, precise way, careful way, those megaliths. They were part of the bedrocks, so they were very stable. The second phase, they were adding those rather primitive dry walls. Now, dry walls in some cases, but in some cases they were real walls because they were connected with the mortar. Now, Klaus Schmidt and his team, when they came here, when they experienced the mortar, now they had a big problem because mortar is very hard to keep it there. Why? Because of the water, the rain is coming, the mortar is eroding. The second problem is the wind. Again, it is eroding. And the third problem is the insects. Insects go there, so it is eroding. So this for me was the second phase, which has nothing to do with the first perfect phase when they built those, as they call them, enclosures. They did not have roofs, but they had only those blocks. And the third phase, of course, when they covered it. And they covered it before the end of the last ice age, which tells me that they knew that the catastrophe was coming. The primitive caveman could not know that, but someone with a very advanced knowledge of astronomy could. So they knew that. Why did they do that? Well, probably they did it in a hurry, they covered it. Did they think they are going to use it in the future? Maybe. Now, we can see that some of them have been broken. It is possible that the original builders left the site, and then the tribes that they were coming without understanding of the site, they were trying to damage it, ruin it, or even destroy it. Now, we are coming to the most important questions of all. What is the purpose of this site? Archaeology and archaeologists do not know, they don't have formal knowledge to understand the sites like this one here. I have done some measurements at 2 different places using several different instruments. The first place was control place, and it was done at the beautiful visitor center which they just opened in 2018. Even though the content, the movie they are showing, has absolutely nothing to do with the site and the primitive, half-naked, tribal people who are shown as the builders. But when you see the site, it is a big difference than what I encountered here 6 years ago. So the first measurement was done there. So this is what I measured. I measured the level of the life energy using experimental life meter, which was made in the US, which is made on William Reich's research from 70 years back, and now they make those instruments. They measure the level of life energy or organ energy. In Eastern tradition, it is called the prana or chi energy. Over there, it was at the level of 22 on the scale from 0 to 122, which is rather high because in the contaminated cities, it is about 10%. The second thing I measured was the concentration of negative ions. Negative ions are very beneficial to human health. Over there, I measured only 300, which is the average value when it comes to the cities or villages. Positive ions, which are not so positive for us, they were at the level of 500. The bad thing, more positive than negative ions. The next thing, magnetic fields. It was stable at 45 nanotesla, and this is something that you can also find in the cities and the villages. Infrasound, range 20 to 40 hertz, nothing specially. Ultrasound 10 to 20 kilohertz. Now, this side here, we are almost on the top of this Göbeklitepe hill. Magnetic field, which really surprised me. It goes anywhere from 41 to 90 nanotesla. What does that mean? It means that this site is energetically active. So it is alive. Even though majority of it is still covered, energetically it is still active. So somebody had the knowledge of energy properties of this place. They were usually building megalithic sites, the pyramid site and the tumulus site on the top of the energy potent places. So what do we have here? Hard to say, but we should have some of this stuff, either underground water flows or cavities on different levels or quartz crystal. So we should have some of those stuff, including some minerals or iron, source of the electromagnetism. So out of 5 or 6 sources, we should have here at least 1, 2, or even 3. The material they use is the limestone. Limestone is very common material in the radius of 100 kilometers. However, only on this particular hill we have this crystalline limestone, which is much harder than limestones around us. If you have such a hard material, you have to have some very superior tools to shape it. And you see how it's beautifully shaped those blocks are. So with the with the limestone, with a lot of quartz in there, it is an ideal medium to transfer the energy from one form to another, from electromagnetic field to the ultrasound, from the ultrasound to electricity, through the piezo electrical effect. So that the first element that I measure, the magnetic field, is the most important. The second one, ultrasound, rather stable, 12 to 15 kilohertz, infrasound, 0 to 40 hertz. Now, this is interesting. If you have some activities at the level 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, now, these extremely low frequencies are very good for humans. They are good for the meditation process. They are good, for the astral projections. So somebody created the place that was excellent for the spiritual activities. Not the way the archaeologists are talking about spirituality and the religious and the other stuff which they don't understand, but about development of spiritual senses, about activating some of those senses. The life energy, next thing, if you remember, control place, it was 22. Here we have 40. On the scale from 0 to 100, it is at the level of 40, meaning it is 2 times better to be than any other place around. And finally, negative and positive ions. Positive ions, only 150 positive ions per cubic centimeter. Very low quantity. However, negative ions at the level of 900, meaning it is almost 3 times higher than at the contaminated places. 900, it's a good level. Of course, it is not beneficial level like, let's say, level of Bosnian pyramid tunnels, which is about 20 to 50,000. But 900 is very beneficial, and the good thing is it's many more negative ions than positive ions. What does that mean? Once you have this free electrical charge in the air, they can start doing their job. They can start removing viruses and bacteria from your body. They can make you physically, mentally, and spiritually pure. They can raise the level of oxygen in your body. So I would say, and this is for the first time ever in the last 20 years that somebody has done these energy measurements. So I'm proving that this was site which was the reason why it was built, it was because of the energy properties. So it is energy related, some type of the energy machine. So I would say archaeologists, historians, anthropologists, geologists will need to open these projects for the engineers and the physicists, and the serious scientific exploration will have to be done here to understand this site. When it comes to the builders, instead of taking bedtime stories about the primitive caveman having nothing to do and shaping and carving all these beautiful megaliths, they should realize that by using the filler material with so much of the ground human bones, it probably tells us something about approach and attitude the real builders had toward Homo sapiens, who, by the way, didn't even live here. This is a huge place. We have 8 circles. When I spoke to Dr. Klaus Schmidt, he told me 2 important things. The first one was that the site was probably between 15 and 18,000 years old, and the second one, there are probably dozens, if not 100 circles, and not a single residential house kilometers around. What does it tell us? It was not built by, those hunters and food gatherers 14,000 years back. They had nothing to do with this site. So out of 5 questions in archaeology, let's see what we had answered today. What is this? Now, this is some type of the energy machine. Who? We don't know who. But all the options are open. Humans, non-humans. Number 3, when? It was the end of the Paleolithic era, not Neolithic. Number 4, how? More advanced tools that we know them. And number 5, why? The ancients, when building such sites, they never had only one purpose. It was always multi-purpose. Communication, health protection, spiritual advancement, improve the molecular structure, water, food, immunity, auric field, and other bioenergetical fields. So now we are getting closer to answer the mystery of Göbekli Tepe. We're very happy to see the Turkish government finally took this location and they are starting to take care of it, investing a lot of money. But what they will need to do, they need to go with the open-minded scientists, engineers, and physicists to understand this place. The year 2019 is the year of Göbekli Tepe, rightfully here in Turkey, but what I'm saying is they need to get the full understanding of this site, and they will be even more proud than stating this was 0 point of time, because it was not, or this was a temple, because it was not.
Brian, thanks for joining us right here at Third Phase of Moon.
My pleasure. Thank you as always.
All right, Brian, I know recently you've been allowed access to unprecedented locations in Egypt. revealed to the public for the first time. Can you tell us about some of the mysteries that you've been involved with as of recent times?
Actually, our trip unfortunately had to be cut short by a few days because of the worldwide events that are going on. So we weren't able to go into what's called the Osiris Shaft, which is a vertical series of shafts that go into the Giza Plateau, about 200 feet underground in the bedrock. But I had been there twice before, and this time there's a site at Abydos, which is in central Egypt, and it's an ancient dynastic place. But there's a structure that was built on purpose underground there out of a combination of giant granite blocks, some weighing 60 tons, and then the perimeter that it's inside is made of quartzite. So the granite comes from Aswan, which is hundreds of miles to the south, and then the quartzite comes from Cairo, which is hundreds of miles to the north, and it's been off limits to the general public more or less forever. So we were able to look down into it, and all of a sudden, because of the influence of our tour director, this man came up to me and simply said, "Let's go." And he let me go down into the Osirion for half an hour by myself.
So you're saying unprecedented access you were given to, and to a place that hasn't been revealed to the public for the first time. Tell us, Brian, what did you experience down there? What did you see?
Well, it's like a lot of the megalithic sites, it looks very industrial in nature. You know, people call everything a temple of the moon or the temple of the sun or the temple of Isis or whatever, but this is clearly a pre-dynastic construction because there's no mortar used whatsoever. It's just giant blocks, incredibly tight fitting, like what we find in Peru and Bolivia and other locations. And no one knows what its original function is, but of course Egyptologists have to give it a name, so they call it one of the symbolic tombs of Osiris, and that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But it's perfectly bilaterally symmetrical, and as I said, it was built on purpose underground next to the dynastic temple, which is called the Seti Temple. So I was able to film quite a bit, thankfully, in there. So that's going to be, I'm putting little clips up on my YouTube channel, but the whole thing I'm going to wait for at least another couple of weeks, as with all of the other stuff that I've been filming in this recent 8th annual trip to Egypt.
Yeah, we're able to share some clips right now at Third Phase of Moon. Special thanks to Brian Forster, and make sure you're going to subscribe to his channel to look at the full-length videos of what he captured at Abydos. But can you tell us some of these granite blocks? They weigh massive amounts, up to 50 tons, you say? How is it possible that they were able to bring these granite stone, down to these subchambers deep below the surface?
Well, that's one of the great mysteries, and the level of precision is, at least 21st century in terms of the technology that would have been required. And we know that for most of dynastic Egypt time, they had bronze tools, just like in Peru, they had bronze tools. And so that doesn't explain how up to 60-ton blocks were cut from a quarry at Aswan in the southernmost point of modern day Egypt and moved, hundreds of miles to the north, and then also the quartzite ones that were moved from Cairo. So, once you've spent time in these megalithic sites, you obviously see the difference between what the dynastic people could have done and what they couldn't have done. And the great thing is that Egypt is opening up more and more of these ancient locations that were off limits, and now they charge a pretty hefty fee, but when we go back next March, our whole group will have access to this same location for 2 hours.
So why do you think that Egypt is kind of loosening up some of these sites and opening it up to the public? Is it just for financial gain, or are they trying to get the information out and share the wealth of history that they actually have in their past?
Well, it's a combination of things. For a long time, there was a man called Mr. Hawass who was in charge of the Council of Supreme Antiquities, and he was very controlling. He was also, I think, financed by the Edgar Cayce Foundation, and so he limited what people could get access to. Like, we do know that there are openings in the Sphinx itself. There are at least 3 different openings there that have been revealed through older video clips. And the new head of the Supreme Council of Antiquities is simply, I think he wants to show more of the grandeur of ancient Egypt, and some of the, some of the younger Egyptologists are realizing that there is this pre-dynastic period of construction, and they can't openly say that to the public yet, but we had one of the best with us, and some of the stories he told me were just mind-boggling. So he knows for sure that there was a very long period of ancient construction, at least 13,000 years ago. And then you had the arrival of the dynastic people about 5,500 years ago. And they simply inherited the much more ancient sites, like the pyramids, the main pyramid system at Giza, and these other locations like the Osirion and the Osiris Shaft, and a lot other. There's a huge tunnel system underneath the Giza Plateau that I was given access to 7 years ago. We spent hours going underground through this tunnel system in the area of the Great Pyramid.
Wow, absolutely incredible. So the pre-dynastic people from over 12,000 years ago, beyond that, where did this civilization end up? Where is the evidence of their tools or their history? Is it written on the walls, or is this something that the history still has yet to consider, these pre-dynastic civilizations?
Well, they're slowly starting to realize it, because so many of us have gone there and filmed these places and showed the difference between what the dynastic people could have done and what they couldn't have done. So it's leaking into the public anyway, and that's the best way for it to happen is for independent researchers to go film it and put it on YouTube and stuff like that. So it's like sand leaking out anyway. So there's no way they can control it. So also there is the financial gain, because it costs between $2,400 and $3,000 for a 2-hour visit to these places. So you have to have a big enough group to go to finance something like that. But the more eyes that see it, the more they will more or less have to open up the other places that have been off limits in the past.
So let me get this right, Brian. So these pre-dynastic civilizations that built these megalithic structures, their technology matches, if not goes beyond modern day technology. Could you tell us how the hell did they get this information and technology over 12,000 years ago to build these megastructures? Where's the evidence of these other megastructures so that they had some prototypes? Where are the prototypes, and how did they get this information and dive straight into these incredible megastructures out of nowhere?
Well, that again is the mystery, but the evidence is the fact that they exist, and the fact that they're made out of hard stone, so they've lasted, several thousand years older than the dynastic time period. People keep asking where are the tools? Well, they either took the tools with them, or the tools have been found and they're being hidden underneath the Cairo Museum. Those are the two plausible answers. But we've also found evidence of catastrophic events having occurred about 13,000 years ago, including heat scorching in locations like Karnak, and a lesser known site in the Nile Delta to the north called Tanis, where you see that the surface of the stone has been scorched by flashes of high heat, and that's been backed up by our geologist who always comes with us. So that's the reason why you always, or almost always, see cataclysmic damage at this site. And it's the same in Peru. Like, none of these structures are perfectly intact. They show signs of massive cataclysmic events occurring in those locations. And if it was heat, for example, like solar plasma from the sun, which is Robert Schoch's theory, that would have vaporized any life form in the area. and could have even melted any metallic tools that were there, so they would be unrecognizable.
So in Egypt, you have this catastrophic event, but then in the continent of America, we have the Ice Age. So there's different contrasts of heat. You have the Ice Age on one side of the planet, and then this catastrophic plasmic wave from the sun possibly destroying the civilizations that built these megalithic structures. Is this the reason why we're not seeing any kind of massive pyramids in the American continent?
Yeah, well, basically, Canada and the United States were buried in 1 to 2 miles of ice up until the end of the last ice age. And the end of the last ice age was very rapid. People think that it was a slow melting of the glacier, but there's more and more evidence that it was incredibly fast. That caused the world's oceans to rise by 350 to 400 feet in a very short time period. We're talking maybe less than a year, and that could have also destabilized the planet itself. At the most ancient sites in Egypt, we see that their alignment is off by 23.5 degrees from north, south, east, and west. So that could be that at the end of the last ice age, you had actually the axis of the planet shift, and that's why these sites are suddenly off. And the dynastic sites are almost perfectly aligned north, south, east, and west.
You were telling us a little earlier in the interview that you were getting knowledge from this tour guide or some officials in Egypt that would blow you away. Can you tell us a little bit of insight? What did he tell you?
Well, we were given access to something that has never been open to the public. I just remembered that's the step pyramid at Saqqara. And the step pyramid of Saqqara, academics say, is the oldest pyramid. It was the first experiment at building a pyramid. So they built a step pyramid, and then after that, they think that the Great Pyramid, the Second Pyramid, and the Third Pyramid were constructed. But that's not actually the case. The step pyramid is the first pyramid that the dynastic people built, but they used as a model the Great Pyramid because it already existed. And so I didn't know, but I was told about a year ago by Nassim Haramein that he was given access to the inside of the step pyramid, and that there's a giant shaft that goes straight down in the middle. So we paid for that last month, and we got to go inside. There's a causeway that goes down into it, and it's several hundred feet that you walk through to get to the central core, and then you look down, and there's a massive shaft that goes down hundreds of feet with a giant box in the center made of huge blocks of granite. And I was told by the guide that we had that it actually goes several stories underground, and that will be opened up over the course of time. So it's that gives more proof that there's a giant system of tunnels underneath, especially the Giza Plateau area, it's a bunch of tunnels that interconnect with one another. And they've even admitted, the Egyptologists admitted that there's one tunnel that goes at least 1.5 miles. And that's an official story.
It seems impossible of the technology and the elaborate tunnel system beneath the pyramids themselves. It makes no sense to me why they would do this unless there was some kind of correlation between all the pyramids and a design behind it. Some people actually claim, and the history books claim, that the pyramids are nothing but tombs for pharaohs, but the history also reveals that there's been no pharaohs found within these ancient pyramids. Well, what do you think the ancient pyramids were designed for?
Well, the thing is that thousands of bodies were buried in the area of the Giza Plateau, but those were chambers and shafts that already existed. So the dynastic people simply used these rooms and chambers and tunnels and shafts as tombs because they were already there. They didn't construct them. There's no evidence, of course, that the Great Pyramid was ever used as a tomb. Actually, none of them. I think there are probably about 8 super ancient pyramids, and then you have the dynastic pyramids, which are much more inferior in terms of construction. And it appears that the ancient pyramids were resonant devices of some kind, not necessarily electricity producing, but energetic in nature, using the energy of the earth itself to enhance and focus that energy, and then project the energy out to the obelisks, which are also pre-dynastic, because the obelisk, the largest, was never completed at 1,200 tons. They are pre-dynastic because they're made of one piece of granite, again from Aswan, and the unfinished one is still in the quarry at Aswan. There's no way that that could have been done during dynastic time. So we also have, again, evidence of ancient cataclysms that suddenly stopped activity. So you have this giant unfinished obelisk. You have the site of Tanis in the Nile Delta that looks like a huge explosion occurred there and just blew everything up. And then you have the dynastic people taking those giant pieces of stone and building other buildings with them in the same relative location. But also Tanis is a hill, and there are, I think, 6 plants that grow there. That's it. The whole area, like the Nile Delta, is incredibly fertile in terms of growing food. Then you have this basically bald hill that has 6 spiky plants growing on it. And when you walk around on the surface, it's like walking on the moon. There is no soil. It's more or less like dust that has no nutrient value in it anymore. Again, that would have been the result of being hit by a giant blast of heat.
You know, it'd be hard to imagine where we'd be today if this cataclysmic event didn't happen and these pre-dynastic civilizations continued to build these megalithic structures. What would it look like on Earth today if this major catastrophe didn't happen? Any theories on that?
Oh, well, we would be incredibly advanced. You know, we would easily be going to the stars by now. If you had 13,000 years of increased industrialization, increased advances in science and things like that. So, but this, it's also believed by some that these cataclysms happen every 13,000 years. So we're actually getting relatively close to that time period. I don't think it'll happen in our lifetimes. It might, but that's why it's important to cherish every day that we do live.
100%, Brian. And recently, there's been people looking at the Atlas comet recently that's kind of come into nearby to planet Earth. What do you make of these celestial objects that do kind of threaten Earth in possible ways? The technology we have now, maybe we could divert some of these cataclysmic events.
Well, we have, yeah, there are many celestial objects come very close to hitting us. You know, it's not that infrequent. And about 1.5 years ago, they discovered in Greenland that there's an asteroid that hit the Earth probably about 13,000 years ago, and it's 1 mile in diameter. It's made of nickel iron, and its force of strike would have been, they calculate, something like 50 million times the power of the Hiroshima bomb. So that could have been one of the things that destabilized the planet, caused it to wobble and then recenter itself, because that could explain why our planet's at 23.5 degrees and not straight up and down. So that's a recent discovery. And that's, we're getting more and more information, more and more science is coming out showing that the series of events happened over the course of probably about 1,000 years. It wasn't like a one-day event, but it was a series of things that happened, destabilized the planet, wiped out all of the megafauna in North America. That's why you find all of those woolly mammoths in Siberia flash frozen with food still in their stomachs. Again, I think that tells us that the planet suddenly was turned in position from vertical to 23 degrees, causing that flash freezing, then the rising of the sea level, the burying of any civilization that would have been close to the seashore at that time, as in Atlantis. You know, Atlantis didn't sink, but the water level rose very, very quickly and caused massive destruction and causing any survivors to escape as fast as possible to find a new homeland.
It's hard to imagine and comprehend just a rock from outer space impacting planet Earth would cause so much destruction. It set us back 13,000 years in technology where we could be traversing the stars right now. It's hard to tell what would have happened if these events didn't go down, but it's kind of sad to think about that we missed out on this technology that was so advanced 12, 13,000 years ago. And how did these civilizations learn this technology to build these megastructures? Boggles the mind. Brian, I know you're a busy guy and you're going to be getting back to Egypt soon. Make sure you follow Brian on his adventures. He's got tons of evidence on his website in regards to the megalithic structures that we talked about today. Brian, it's been our pleasure having you right here at Third Phase of Moon. You be safe over there.
Okay, it's always a pleasure to be with the Cousins brothers. Aloha.
Well, thank you, Brian, and everybody. You be safe out there as well, and keep your eyes on the skies. And if you see anything amazing, submit it to us right here at Third Phase of Moon. Blake Cousins. We'll see you real soon.